This is the Science as Unusual, COVID-19 Science, Innovation and Societal Recovery in Sub-Saharan Africa. And the session is going to explore the important role that research funding bodies in Sub-Saharan Africa have played during the pandemic, and B, look at what that tells us about the critical role of science, research and innovation in local and regional development in the post-COVID world. So let's go ahead. We've got 4 papers. Emmanuel was meant to start, but he's not with us yet. So let's go to Julius and Anne-Marie, if that's okay with you guys. And you, Anne-Marie, maybe I think you're going to kick off. And you've got 20 minutes. And I think Emmanuel may join us a bit later.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you all. Well, we are going to talk about this topic. We are going to talk about COVID-19 and beyond, why science as usual will not work. And we are a team of 4 researchers, Julius, Anne-Marie, Carla, Remy, and Julius, Carla, and Remy, they are from UCL, and Anne-Marie is from the University of Rwanda. The work that we are going to explore and that we are going to share this afternoon emerged from a partnership between the University of Rwanda and the University College London, and we were working on a work commissioned by SJCI, Science Granting Council Initiative, and we're exploring case studies on effectiveness of science granting councils in Sub-Saharan Africa. And throughout this paper that we are going to share, we argue that the pressure from COVID-19 pandemic necessitates rethinking of how science systems can work and be productive in unusual times. So we argue for science as unusual. If I give some context and background, we during the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the pandemic exposed weaknesses that not only were in health systems, but also it was an eye-opener that, for many aspects of the society, there were weaknesses that needed special attention. And it was also seen that different disciplines need to work together. And even if science and engineering and science in general was thought of finding solution to societal challenges, but it was also seen that, we need synergies, we have to put knowledge together and systems in order to deal with the societal challenges and find solutions to pressing problems. Now, if we argue for science as unusual, we also think about how to best fund and govern science. And while science and engineering are found or thought of to be pillars to advise society to find societal responses to challenges, but their effectiveness also depends on the coalition, the interaction between research, industry, and government. You know, it's a complexity chain that needs to be put together to find solutions to different problems. This has been debated quite often, and you know, for now we come here to argue that, you know, there is no subdivision between natural sciences and other sorts of sciences, but there is no frontier to science, but there is interaction and interdisciplinarity, and different aspects need to be put together. Different knowledge systems need to be put together to find solutions to pressing societal issues and problems. As I was saying at the beginning, we draw upon our work in Sub-Saharan Africa, and the basis for today is the work we completed with SJCI, the Science Granting Council's initiative. And SJCI, as it was launched as a multi-funder initiative in 2015. We've got IDRC, DFID, NRF, and later on CEDA, and the initiative put together efforts to support research that would lead to policy, you know, research-based policies that would eventually solve societal problems. And the goal of SJCI is mainly to strengthen the capabilities of SJCs to support research that will inform evidence-based policies and eventually contribute to social and economic development of the 15 sub-Saharan African countries. So our presentation will be mainly based on the work that we covered from September 2019 to July 2020. And as I said before, this was a collaboration between UCL and University of Rwanda. Now I'm going to focus on the methodology that we used as we were carrying out that study. We selected 9 countries. The nine country case studies were Burkina Faso, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Rwanda, Senegal, Uganda, and Zambia. We used primary data as well as secondary data. In the secondary data, we had desk research, where we read different documents. And then later on, after the empirical review, we also had to use questionnaires and some interviews, semi-structured interviews with mainly the SJCs, different SJCs in the 9 selected countries, then the CTAs and the SJCs and the management team. And in total, we had 29 interviews, and the data were later analyzed thematically, especially the qualitative data, and the quantitative data were analyzed through tabulation and statistical analysis. Now, after getting the data, we had to analyze. And in our analysis, was based on basically the 4 themes that are there: the research management, the use of STI indicators. We also explored the development or strengthening of partnerships and knowledge exchange with the private sector. the private sector engagement, and we also focused on the coordination and collaboration between different SJCs that participate, that are part of the SJCI. And all this was to inform or to be part of the monitoring and evaluation work that monitoring, evaluation and learning work that SJCI has to carry out to also inform the progress or the impact of the initiative. Yeah, now the project process. Actually, with the main question that was guiding our research was to answer the question on how Science Granting Council initiative, how the SJCI, the training and other forms of technical support are influencing the beneficiary science granting councils. You know, SJCI has been providing trainings and other forms of technical support. So our aim was to find out how that has been impacting on the different science granting councils. And we had evaluation questions. We had questions that guided our research, and the matching data that we're supposed to get for each and every question. Then the different data source and the data that we would get would actually inform the thematic analysis, and which would also inform the recommendations for SJCs, and again recommendations for the SJCI, and all the recommendations would of course emerge from the findings. So the first question we had was how have evidence, knowledge exchange and support informed research allocation and grant management by SJCs? And that was that question led us to the collection of qualitative data. And the second question was how have learning outputs been taken up by the SJCs? And that also gave us qualitative data in terms of needs, activities, capabilities, and outputs. And again, they generated different themes. Then the last question that was actually the leading question that was to provide learning or to inform the next stage. The next phase was what adjustments need to be made in SJCI processes for increased effectiveness of SJCs. So also that gave us qualitative and quantitative data in terms of funding needs, capabilities, and plans. So as I said, all this gave us the different themes, the thematic analysis revealed the different themes in terms of finding, and later on with emergence of recommendations. Yeah. I think now I'm going to hand over to Julius to continue. Over to you, Julius.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for that nice overview on the background to the project and what we did. So I'm just going to continue from where Anne-Marie left, just sharing a bit of the findings. It was a big project with many findings across the different areas that we're exploring, but we'll just give you just a few of those as we try to build towards the argument we are making that science as usual will not work beyond the pandemic. So looking at the SJCs as the units of analysis, and across the 4 thematic areas that Anne-Marie highlighted on research management, indicators, partnerships, and so on, we found that the training and other forms of support from the initiative had resulted in a number of improvements in terms of effective research management practices, strengthening of partnerships between councils and other actors within the science systems, knowledge exchange with the private sector, coordination within the councils and also between the councils in the different countries. So those were direct results from the intervention of the initiative. And also the SGCs themselves saw a number of changes in their own roles in their national science systems, including issues around funding allocation, also more serious considerations of issues of equality, diversity, and inclusion, including gender issues as well, even inclusion of young researchers. Those are issues that came out very prominently. Then the issue around indicators as well was really highlighted as one of the issues that had risen to prominence as a result of the work of the initiative. Then thinking about the connections between the private and the public sector and other actors within the ecosystem as well. So, and again, our study managed to really confirm the location and the role of science granting councils is a core actor, is a point of coalition for different actors within the science systems, whether it's the public or the private actors, the non-profit actors, including local and international actors as well. They all coalesce around the science granting councils in the different countries. But some realities began to emerge for us as we analyzed the data closely, using thematic analysis and also reflecting through the lens of what was going on with the pandemic. One of them being that the issues of context and issues of relevance and timeliness of decisions is really key. And I think we have seen that coming to the fore in so many countries, how decision-making systems have managed to play a role or to probably be a weak point in the system, depending on how quickly decisions were communicated, how quickly tools from science and engineering were harnessed and deployed in response to the pandemic, whether it was at the delay phase where countries were initially trying to delay entry of the virus into their borders, but also even to mitigate when the pandemic had already set into the different countries. So science or tools from science and innovation is overseen by the science granting councils were really seen to be very, very important, but their relevance and timely availability being a key reality that was emerging. Then two other realities as well. One being the issue of functional embedded capabilities, that having local capabilities has proved to be quite key across so many countries as countries retreated into their national spaces to deal with their own challenges first. It meant that each country had to have its own capability to be able to make decisions, to generate the tools that were needed, whether it's for diagnostics or any forms of therapeutics that could be available. So the importance of local capabilities has really proved to be key within the science systems broadly. Then the other issue that we are also seeing, or that we have seen, is that the pandemic has also seriously challenged global confidence in traditional sources of the so-called best practice for science leadership. Countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of the developing world have always looked to the global north for lessons on how to make decisions, how to deploy different tools or different components of systems. But the reality of how every part of the world really struggled to different extents also just raises the reality that these challenges can be difficult and very daunting for everybody. So that's why localization of some of these tools and processes is really key. So we are actually then proposing from there a progression from what we are calling the science systems as settled to some kind of science as unusual, or to really unsettle the usual. And so the AMBER is talking about the systems as settled, where we are seeing the dominance of traditional science disciplines and ways of knowing. There is a lot of talk and a lot of engagement around interdisciplinary work, but I think in most of the cases it comes through as some kind of nice to have. we can do it, but the pandemic has actually shown that it is important, not just as something that is nice to have, but really decentering privileged ways of knowing or ways of doing is important. We have seen, for example, how behavioral sciences have become very prominent in shaping issues around social distancing and the other issues of dealing with the pandemic. So actually having those functional interdisciplinary spaces or cross-disciplinary or multidisciplinary arrangements is really important. Then in the settled systems, there's a lot of rigidity as well, which we have seen through our work with the SJCs, but also even beyond the African countries, issues around the usual factors or the usual actors that come into partnerships, the usual response mechanisms, the usual funding mechanisms, where you write proposals, you look to the global north for funding, and then the funding comes through the usual review processes and the usual platforms for the interface between science, policy, and society. So these have been some of the usual sort of mechanisms in place, but we have seen some of the weaknesses in that, the issues around proximity, for example, where embedded capabilities are not available locally. And then we are saying there's really need for bridging that know-how and know-do gaps. It's not just about knowing how to do it, but actually being able to do it. Because the reality is, it's one thing to have a science granting council and the different actors within the system, but it's quite another to be able to get onto the ground and respond at the time and point of need. So that has really come through very clearly from the pandemic. Then we are also making an argument for institutional entrepreneurship, where I think for a long time, the science granting councils have been some kind of epistemic community, probably very much removed from what's happening in the mainstream. In some countries, they are located maybe in the office of the president or the prime minister, or they are a standalone ministry, but the kind of connection that they have with the rest of the actors is something that needs to be rethought. And also thinking that even the kind of innovation that needs to happen is not only that which should be done by actors that are in the periphery, but even the core of the system needs to innovate so that it can be agile and responsive to the realities that are there. And one of the arguments related to that, which was coming through even while we were doing the work before the pandemic, but also during the pandemic, was the connection between science and innovation. That science without innovation is enough. There is need to strengthen the continuum, that it doesn't become just science for science sake, but how does it actually translate into innovation, or those tools and mechanisms that can be able to deal with societal challenges. And then the issue of co-working spaces. Again, this is really about making sure there is practice beyond the discourses and beyond all the mechanisms that are very good on paper or very good in the discussion tables, but there are working spaces that actually make sure that there is trust and there is experience between the different actors that need to respond. And in one of the projects that we looked at here in the UK, looking at the development of a breathing device by a team of engineers from the UCL working with partners from industry, actually confirmed the importance of those working spaces that are there before a pandemic, so that people can be able to prove that they can work together. You can't underestimate the issues around trust and the people just being able to get together and deploy their different skills. So that's really one of the things you're saying should happen in the unsettled usual, so that it's not just about talking and then thinking about working later on. But there are so many issues that could conspire against this science as unusual. Issues around the fitness for purpose of the infrastructures and institutions that are there, whether the adjustments needed will be able to happen quickly enough and to be sustained, the issues around institutional and collective will beyond just political will, but there's need for will at the different levels as well to be able to get the traction that's needed. And then we are also a bit worried about what you're calling collective amnesia, that when the pandemic has waned down, has relented, are we going to revert back to practice as usual? just normalizing this adversity that, oh, it came, it went, now let's have the institutions that we have had and continue to function with our different science granting councils. And that probably links into some of the political rhetoric that is there. We know there's a lot of talk about building back better, but for us, it could be one of the challenges, because building back, if it means going back to where we were, we know it might mean different things, but we are saying maybe it's better off talking about building forward better, because the systems we had probably did not serve what we wanted to do, or they've actually not been good enough for the responses we wanted to have. So there might be some persistent paradigms as well, which are linked to rhetoric, but even to just the challenges around change management, really. So these are some of the issues that you are raising. And as we conclude, we are really saying the main argument you are making here is that socio-technical imaginaries, whatever new normal we're expecting around science systems, this doesn't just emerge, but it will be a result of deliberate choices and decisions by multiple actors. And we think the pandemic is a key moment for new choices and new actions to be made regarding the interface between science, technology, and society. So let me end it here, and then we can come back to these issues and others in a conversation later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julius and Anne-Marie. What an interesting paper. I've got actually lots of questions, but we'll get to them later, as you said. I think Emmanuel still isn't with us, so let's go on to Kehinde. If you're ready now.
I'm ready.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Let me now share my screen. Can you see the full screen? Hello, everyone.
Not the full screen yet.
Okay, now?
Yes, we can now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's it.
Thank you, everyone, and for this opportunity to share this paper with you. It's actually a research paper. It's not guided by any project or any grant whatsoever. It's a paper in a developmental stage that we hope to submit to a potential outlet for publication soon enough. And what we're basically looking at with this in this paper is the role of government programs, as the quality of government programs in supporting the internal and external resources of firms. At the same time, we're also trying to investigate how these government programs shape ownership, to impact performance of innovative active firms in about 6 continents, including Sub-Saharan African countries. We have 3 authors on this paper. Laura Barasa is from the University of Nairobi School of Economics, a senior lecturer. And Erica Kramambola, a shareholder and a professor of economics, at the University of Johannesburg. This is the outline of the presentation. Looking at first, we look at introduction and conceptual approach. Then we progress to the theory and hypothesis. Then looking at the data and methods. Then the key findings, then limitation, managerial application, and the future avenue for further research. Here is a conceptual model looking at the different forms of ownership, and also different sources of finance, and how these quality of government programs, for SMEs particularly, could shape, these two constructs to impact, entrepreneurial activities of firms. Firm survival and growth are arguably the most essential objectives for firms in the competitive market. And this holds true for SMEs, although subject to the liability of smallness and newness, respectively. SMEs are commercial entities that aim to exploit market opportunities to survive and grow in the short run, and to maximize revenue and profits, in the long run. SMEs account for most firms, in most economies, and are regarded as the engine of growth and innovation. Innovation fosters national prosperity by promoting efficiency and competitiveness in enterprises. However, the prevalence of underinvestment in research and development results in innovation market failure. Many countries have instituted government support programs to remedy this problem, including policy instruments that enhance R&D infrastructure, fiscal incentives, training and skill development, creating an enabling legislative and regulatory environment for business to thrive. Several studies have also identified different prerequisites of innovation in SMEs from developing and developed countries context. In this paper, we present the most fundamental instrument that shape entrepreneurial innovation in firms, including internal resources, external factors, ownership structures, and institutional dimension and support. According to the classical literature on firms' resource-based view, firms with monetary and non-monetary forms of resources with internal value can maintain market competitiveness. Besides, existing literature also shows that heterogeneous firm resources such as financing, enterprise governance structure characteristics are essentially crucial for innovation performance. Notwithstanding, there is a dearth of empirical studies investigating the relationship between the quality of government support programs, that is soft interventions from government, firm resources, and innovation. So the question we're actually trying to address here is to see to what extent would government support programs for businesses targeting SMEs impact the performance of firms regarding their internal and external resources, and at the same time how does it augment the performance of the institutional structure of these organizations to shape performance. So what remains unexplored is whether soft government business support services can help firms mitigate the cost of hiring consultants to provide such services to impact performance. Importantly, we want to answer the question of whether these soft services can moderate the link between multi-stakeholders, firms' internal and external resources, and total entrepreneurial activity that introduce new products on the market. This study contributes to the innovation literature in several ways. First, our study combines micro data from the World Bank Enterprise and macro data from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor to capture firm characteristics and total entrepreneurial activity to explore how the quality of government support program affects entrepreneurial innovation in different economic regions. These data sets contain comparable data across countries or across regions, which is useful for drawing insight into why cross-country differences in innovation performance might arise. Second, this study focuses on entrepreneurial innovation emerging from the proportion of new and growing firms engaging in total entrepreneurial activity that introduce new product or service on the market. This category of entrepreneur is of importance because innovation entrepreneurship is likely to create jobs and foster economic growth. Third, there are virtually no empirical study exploring the role of government support programs in fostering innovation in Sub-Saharan Africa. So what we did in this particular study is to explore the predictive margins, for this respective continent in order to see the dynamic with the observed coefficients from the regression output. This study will therefore contribute to the nascent body of knowledge on innovation outcomes in this continental region. Lastly, by evaluating the moderating role of government support programs between heterogeneous firm resources and innovation performance, the study will provide a better understanding of the condition under which entrepreneurial innovation thrives. Specifically, the study investigates the relationship between financing, internal and external, enterprise governance structure, looking at private ownership, foreign ownership, female ownership, male ownership, and a combination of foreign domestic and private foreign ownership and innovation performance. So this contributes to developing policies aimed at achieving sustainable development goals, specifically supporting the innovation performance of firms. This is the first theory, but by the time we take into account the structure of finance and how finance contributes significantly to the innovation endeavor of firms, you will agree with me that innovation activities rely heavily on finance to succeed. Also, more importantly, diverse finance sources are considered fundamental to facilitate more innovation success. Finance is an engine for the innovation performance of firms. Scholars also contend that finance nurtures firms' innovation and facilitates firms to diversify risk, thereby engaging more intensive innovation. At the same time, authors also document that finance supports firms to innovate, expand operations, and invest in valuable activities. Finance graces the productive channels, stimulates and expands smooth operation of firms, and can be a precondition to firm innovation performance. Access to finance has prominently figured as a barrier to firm innovation and growth, especially when we look at firms from developing countries. At the same time, SMEs with access to external financing possess greater operational flexibility that can be leveraged to formulate and implement diverse strategic options along their value chain activities. For example, SMEs with external financial resources can commit to diverse upstream innovation activities, generating this competitive advantage. Increasing in innovation activity can also help SMEs pursue differentiated strategies with new products and services, offering them a first mover advantage. Further, the increase in innovation activities can help SMEs achieve lower manufacturing costs, resulting in improved production, efficiency, since accumulated experiences are often accompanied by intensive learning effect due to the substantial economies of scale and scope of innovation. With external resources, SMEs can better formulate and implement tailored downstream marketing strategy that could translate into improved performance. Now, by the time we look at the significant role of finance to innovation, we can congesture that. Firms, that get support from the government, irrespective of the scope, can actually improve their performance outcome. Now, in the second aspect, which is also an important part of innovation, is the ownership structure. Ownership and innovation cannot be separated. They are fundamental in shaping the entrepreneurial activities of firms. However, justifying the pivotal role of external resources and government-aided support services to SMEs dependent on external resource mobilization often results in multi-stakeholder ownership or involvement that can provide distinct business benefit. Institutional factor may serve as an enhanced advantage to foreign and domestic ownership to function effectively. Foreign-owned enterprises are a key source of employment and firm growth globally, particularly in developing countries. Further, foreign-owned enterprises are among the top performers in R&D and innovation globally. Foreign-owned firms account for over 1/2 of R&D expenditure in a number of countries. However, innovation and technology are the key dimensions in which foreign-owned enterprises and domestic firms differ. Foreign ownership facilitates the transfer of superior technology, which is imperative for innovation. Therefore, foreign-owned enterprises possess superior firm-specific resources and may face fewer financial and technological constraints because they can access larger investor networks and skilled expertise, which spur innovation performance. Many countries strive to create an attractive investment environment for foreign investment. High-quality government support may signal to foreign investors that the business environment is sound, conducive to entrepreneurial innovation. Hence, government support aimed at attracting foreign ownership may boost R&D investment, yielding desirable innovation outcomes and job creating and complementary effect. Nonetheless, domestic enterprises, on the other hand, are more likely to enjoy favorable terms, opportunities, and protection than their foreign counterparts. Government policy generally targets domestic enterprises because they drive the regional and national development agenda. In essence, domestic enterprises may further benefit from knowledge and R&D spillover from foreign firms. We then propose that high-quality government support could amplify the positive effect of both foreign and domestic ownership on innovation, with the latter having a stronger effect on performance. So if we then look at the constructs, how the synergetic effect of government support with ownership in impacting performance, it's also good we look at what are some of the constructs of government business support services to firms. As you will see from the diagram, as pertains this particular study, we've used this different construct as extract from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor to investigate the impact of the quality of government support programs on the entrepreneurial and innovative performance of firms. Government diagnostic and business support services mirror in many aspects the private types of value-added support services that consulting firms or venture capitalists provide to their entrepreneurial startups or incubators to help them succeed. First, government support services for businesses can help diminish SMEs' liability of newness that occurs due to low level of experience as new participant in the competitive global market. Government agency providing support services for SMEs in diverse and heterogeneous manner can signal SMEs' profit potential to the wider business community. Further, it could help firms, especially targeted SMEs, to formulate and implement relevant differentiation strategies for new product or service and customize marketing strategies to enhance local customers' perception of the differentiated attributes of SME new product or services. Several empirical studies show that soft types of government support may be beneficial to SMEs in enhancing performance in the UK, in the US, in China, in Germany, and even in some developing countries, including Sub-Saharan Africa. Government support programs and entrepreneurial innovation between countries and continental regions vary substantially. Various authors argue that institutional factors and government policies account for cross-country differences in entrepreneurial activity. As a result, the impact of government support programs on innovation outcomes has attracted considerable attention in the past, and even recently. Notwithstanding, there is a dearth of empirical study investigating the relationship between the quality of government support programs, firm resources, and innovation. Besides,
Hindi, just a couple more minutes.
All right.
Sorry to rush you.
Yeah. So besides, existing literature shows that heterogeneous firm resources such as financing, enterprise structures, characteristics are essentially crucial for innovation performance. So government financial aid involving technological development, assistance, and university network positively, as we find, affect firm performance, especially SMEs. And and different other studies point to the fact that firm getting support from government allow them to actually perform better. As such, when SMEs apply and receive non-monetary business support services, such as intensive business training, mentoring, and other form of support, they tend to advance their performance outcome. So as a result, we developed 4 different hypotheses, as you can see, looking at government support, how government support complement internal and external resources of firms, how also government support support the different forms of ownership in predicting total entrepreneurial activities of firms, introducing new to the market product. And as you can see, the World Bank Enterprise Survey and the Global Innovation Entrepreneurship Monitor constitute the source of the data. And we explored the fixed effect and Heckman 2-stage estimation. I may not be able to explain further, but I will just go to the variables. And as you can see, the core dependent variable here is the total entrepreneurial activity, introducing new to market products by firms. And we have the moderator to be the quality of government programs. And we have other controls and other explanatory variables as we have for ownership and different sources of finance. The summary of our finding is that, looking at the fixed effect, we have the government support program to be positive, to impact total entrepreneurial activity positively. We have the working capital owned and government support program to be positive, synergic, the synergetic effect, positive and significant. The same thing with the Heckman. Then we have for internal fund, we have negative but significant. For if firms should have line of credit, we have the outcome to be positive and significant. We have for private domestic ownership, positive and significant for both Heckman and fixed effect. Then we have for private firms putting together private domestic and private firms, we also observe, a positive and synergetic effect of these, constructs. The same goes with female ownership. We have positive and synergetic effect in explaining the total entrepreneurial activities. And this is just the regression outcome, from the Heckman model. And here you have the fixed effect here, the fixed effect here. Then here we have the Heckman estimation approach. We really do not have significant divergence with regards to the synergetic effect of firms' internal resource and government support program. At the same time with the external resources and government support program. However, we have significant divergence between this construct when you compare the fixed effect estimation and that of the Heckman two-stage model. We also did a number of estimation, considering the predictive margins, and you will see for East Asia and the Pacific, this is the dynamic of the graph. Then you have for Europe and Central Asia, we see the relationship to be positive and significant. We see for Latin America and the Caribbean, we see, the effect is somewhat mixed. This is for Middle East and North Africa. We also have a positive, synergetic effect. More the visualization we have here is more pronounced, as compared to when you look into the coefficients from the regression. And this is South Asia. This is Sub-Saharan Africa, and you see the relationship is completely negative. But when you look at female ownership, the relationship is positive for female ownership. So the paper basically demonstrates how the synergetic effect of innovation input with government-aided support can help firms attain significant innovation performance, especially for entrepreneurs. Even though social and cultural norms are shown to constrain women-owned ventures' productiveness, our findings demonstrate that government-aided programs can debase cultural and social norms to push the participation of women in businesses to achieve the desired performance. Then our analysis appeals to governance at different levels that firms' overall support is an important step to drive economic growth and development through growth-driven innovation activities. While our results support firms' constant engagement with governments, top managers should not circumvent regulation to drive performance. This might strain their overall relationship with the government, with government agencies, hence making operation cumbersome. Finally, helping banks create and improve new credit score instruments that better display firms' innovative potential, irrespective of size, could be crucial for innovation projects. Thank you. I hope I've not taken much of the time.
It was a very, very interesting presentation. I think the work that you're doing is just so relevant to so many of the big questions around supporting innovation and innovation for economic growth. I'm involved in a project at the moment which gives testimony to your observation right at the beginning of the paper that there's very little work in this area. A big bibliometric study shows that that's the case around innovation, support for innovation in Sub-Saharan Africa, very little work in that area. So important work, thank you. I can see that Emmanuel has joined us now, and a big welcome to you, Emmanuel. I think you were scheduled to go first, but if you wanted to present now, that would work. You'd be the third.
Yes.
Presenter. Fantastic. Hello. Hi.
Hello. Fine.
Very nice to see you. So if you're ready, let's move forward. And got 20 minutes. That's all right.
So should I go ahead?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
I don't know if you can see my slide.
Yes, we can see your slides. Great.
I'm Emmanuel. I have to present on SJCI policies and industry strategies for developing countries in post-COVID-19 economic recovery. So this is a focus in Africa. The distribution of
Oh no, I spoke too soon.
countries for those countries that are not able to produce drugs. So are left to developing countries, especially those in West African countries, which have little or no drug manufacturing. How should these firms learn to produce drugs? They are finding it difficult to produce drugs, and vaccine production is simply not there. In few countries, it could be just one or two. So then we will look at the possible policy recommendations to make. So pharmaceutical innovations is strongly guided by the patent system. And just as we know, like I said earlier, the COVID-19 is disrupting the trend which we are used to. So the pharmaceutical industry today is thinking of making donations of the IPs that they have in public health interest. So trade representative, Catherine Tai, she said,
Oh dear. Emmanuel, I think we've lost you.
Yeah, we seem to have lost him.
I'm still there, it's just that I'm seeing the internet is saying quite unstable.
Yes.
So, yeah, so the patents are only one of the constraints in a company. You have the key issues of manufacturing being there. So some trade group IPs being revoked or waived could cause catastrophe over the time. It will slow down innovation. So when you simply remove patents and IP issues, who will fund new drugs. So weak patent doesn't support global pharmaceutical innovation. So this is the trend we have in the usual science and R&D in pharmaceutical sciences. So lengthy period to produce drugs, to have them in the market, same as vaccine. Over time, with the administrative rules, that has affected drug development and so on. But this is on the STI model of learning. R&D is key to STI learning, science, technology, and innovation. So you have huge public R&D funding in research institutes and spending by big pharmaceutical firms. So this usual science favors the linear model of innovation. And that is what you see, a straight line from basic science, engineering, production, and then marketing and sales. The one that is pulled by the market, you have market needs leading to development, manufacturing, and sales. So these shows the kind of economic models we will have. The evolutionary economic model shows that you cannot have the usual science go on. They have learning by doing, learning by using, interaction, and then even reverse engineering. So learning is somehow path dependent. So we are looking at this study. It's in literature review. We use secondary data that were available. But I must tell you that the thrust of this study was born after the study we had in 2019. There was a survey of the pharmaceutical industry in West Africa. So we use that as a case study, though I was part of the group that collected data for the Nigerian project, which was part of the West African countries. So yeah, so there in pharmaceutical manufacturing, you have production at a range of 10 to 30% among the countries. This should be UNIDO, not UNIDO. So UNIDO, you have in West Africa, 15 countries in the ECOWAS state. Now you have, and 15 do not have any form of pharmaceutical manufacturing. And then this manufacturing is about 10 to 30%. So this is the distribution of the number of manufacturers. In Benin, you have one. The largest concentration of manufacturing is 37 in Ghana, 120 in Nigeria, and then you have plus 170 that are into ECOWAS states. So this is just a simple distribution of the firm. Yeah, I said that most of the firms in Nigeria and the other ones in Ghana. And then we see sort analysis of the pharmaceutical industry in West Africa. And I noted that body, which is ECOWAS, to attract public-private partnership initiatives in the region. We also have regulation. They're trying to have a joint regulation. Pharmaceutical firms to have best global manufacturing the practices within the firms. Then you have the market that has huge opportunities because there is no manufacturing and the prices of drugs are high. So that attracts possible investments. So you could see, then we have the weaknesses, very poor leadership and governance. You're not having government investing incentives to help those investing in. Also have a dominance of multinational firms. When you have the capital base of one manufacturing multinational firm that is quite bigger than about 10 or 15 of the other ones who are local. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good, good.
We can hear you. We've lost your slides, Emmanuel.
We lost, yeah.
These challenges. Yeah, the challenges of manufacturing there. The challenges seems to spread across the value chain from the inputs. Most of the active are imported into West Africa for them to package. You have production facilities. Most of them are from the survey we did in Nigeria. of those firms, you have 40% utilization, capacity utilization for firms. And then public procurement is low. You have supply of skilled labor is in, you have low supply of skilled labor. You have weak regional regulation, state and regional regulation. You have low R&D investment. So, and then you have the problems of drugs being Africa from Asia. Mainly
You may deactivate your video now.
Remind me. These are the range of products that they have. You have also a problem of the R&D intensity. You compare to what you have globally or elsewhere in Africa. So that you could expect in the kind of drugs that are manufactured in West Africa. So we're recommending that you should have STI, a mix of STI and GUI models of learning. Have a good STI model, STI investment in West Africa. People ordinarily give excuses for the low Africa, but what the lessons we can learn from China and other developing countries who have actually involved in pharmaceutical manufacturing should actually leapfrog what you have by possibly investing in artificial intelligence, 3D printing, and then even additive manufacturing. So part of to also go beyond what they're doing in individual countries to pool joint joint processes that they may have to start from one of the states to the pharmaceutical manufacturing is an issue of national security and part of the individual country's industrial policies. So I have these recommendations here. And we believe that once this work is done, we should be able to have a brief to communicate the ECOWAS Secretariat for possible
Emmanuel, thank you so much for sticking with that. It was just such an interesting and important topic that you're dealing with there. That whole issue of supply chains and pharmaceuticals and the importance of local production has really, well, it's had a spotlight shone on it by COVID-19 like no other issue. So a real pleasure to hear your talk and thank you for sticking with us. Carla and Remy, we're running late, so let's move on immediately and hear your presentation, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time. I mean, it's only us, so we could go over a little bit, and that might be how we deal with this situation. But Carla and Remy, if you're ready, it would be great to hear your presentation now.
Yeah, sure. So it's come up perfect. Okay, and let's just check, is it progressing?
All good.
Amazing. Okay, right. So I will certainly try to do the introductory bit as quickly as possible, and then we have more time on the results and the discussion. This is very much a tag team actually with the first presentation that was given by Julius and Anne-Marie. So it's based kind of on the same project. So this is on the follow-up to the project that was introduced in the first presentation. And I will give a bit of context, particularly as I know, Emmanuel, you weren't here at the very beginning of that. So there is a little bit of context in this presentation. But the title of the initial project is up at the top. It's the Science Granting Council's Initiative in Sub-Saharan Africa Training Effectiveness Case Studies project. And this is the kind of plus bit. This is the follow-on bit from that. So that initial study was really doing sort of what it says exactly, trying to develop case studies to understand how effective different elements of the training program that had been offered over the last couple of years by SJCI to science granting councils had been. So I've put the key messages up front, which I realize is a very sort of policy thing to do, but we can go through them and then they, of course, are summarized again at the end. But this is just to say that the initial project, the STEX project that has been introduced, and this follow-on, the STEX Plus project, both suggested that science granting councils have a great potential to play key roles in both short-term response and long-term resilience within national systems of science and innovation. And I think Julius and Anne-Marie really did set that out very well in that initial presentation. The STEX Plus project, this follow-on, really did explore the role of science granting councils in the COVID-19 response, particularly elements around leveraging networking between science granting councils and looking at partnership opportunities, influencing national responses, and engaging significantly in providing or facilitating funding mechanisms for responsive research. And I suppose it's fair to say that this is a work in progress. This particular piece of project is closed, but work continues around SJCI more broadly to understand if and how these shifts in additions to or amplification of the roles that science granting councils had been playing are maintained in their activities following the pandemic. So whether these changes are embedded in different ways in longer term operation of the science granting councils. So yeah, the context in June 2020, just as the STEX project, the original part of this project, looking at science granting councils and SJCI was wrapping up its work, the sort of scale and longevity of the COVID-19 pandemic was emerging. Of course, it emerged much earlier than that, but I think this was a turning point in the year at which many countries recognized that actually this is something that was here to stay for quite some time, and quite significant changes would need to be made to engage with it and the way that it progressed. Given the rapid onset and the severity of the pandemic, there was quite rapid work to understand, or a need for quite rapid work to understand how science granting councils were operating, how they could respond, and try to provide, I suppose, a snapshot or an important window into their role and the importance of what they were doing during this particular time of crisis. So the STEX team, who you've seen on the first slide and who Anne-Marie introduced, was commissioned to move into a short responsive phase between July and October of last year to understand how science granting councils across those 9 study countries had been involved in national responses. And the overarching question that we were asking within this STEX Plus project was, has the development of science, technology, and innovation capacities in the science granting councils enabled them to act more swiftly, more decisively, or with greater impact in their response to the pandemic? I suppose this is a plug as well as a useful way of pulling out a sort of sub-question within that bigger research question. So this is actually taken from a blog piece that we published on the UCL STEEP blog, and there is the Twitter announcement of this happening as well. It has this title at the top of the slide, and we can share this afterwards. But within this, we asked this particular sub-question, as we said, of whether kind of swiftness, decisiveness, or impact was enabled. But some more details can be seen in that blog piece. So the background, I suppose, to this, and this links very strongly to the first presentation again, was understanding the contribution of SGCs in this short-term response context, but trying to tie that to those longer-term issues, and actually longer-term issues of systemic change that Julius has introduced in that concept of science as unusual. Again, just kind of recognizing and restating that from the work that we've done, from the literature that we dug into, and from the STEX project, we appreciated that institutions tasked with supporting national systems of science and innovation really had a huge role to play in the response to COVID-19 in terms of generation of insights and the allocation and mobilization of different kinds of resources to different stakeholders. But that in this extended state of crisis, many institutions were really grappling with these roles, trying to understand how to balance short-term responsive issues and longer-term developmental and strategic goals. We tried to think about this a little bit in terms of perhaps some more familiar models that we see in the literature of crisis and resilience. This sense that when you have an organization, it has a certain amount of resilience built into it, but that actually strange and rapid and kind of unusual events like the COVID-19 pandemic really can act to test or move or disrupt that state of resilience in very different ways. We thought this was quite a nice model to sort of communicate that, perhaps, that every institution has a knowledge base from which it's drawing. It has a set of operations, and those operations can include various ways of anticipating issues, coping with and adapting to issues as they emerge. So I suppose it's fair to say that this kind of model was in the back of our minds as we were going through this piece of work for STEX Plus, trying to understand, okay, these organizations that we already have a snapshot of through the STEX project, how do we see them reacting? How do we see them as having anticipated what they are going to be demanded to do in this context? Are they able to cope in doing so? And how have they adapted to the role that has been asked of them during the pandemic? But understanding, as I say, sort of, again, short and long term, how was this during specific points of the pandemic, but how does this link to their operations over a longer space and time? And this was the conceptual framework for the STEX Plus study. So as I say, very closely echoing the sort of model that was flagged up then, but much, much simplified and tagged particularly to the case of science granting councils. So understanding how the pandemic inspired need for change and the embedded agency and operations for action within SGCs reacted in terms of being able to set up mechanisms for response, to adjust, to mobilize, and to deploy things in response to that trigger, and the sorts of outcomes or contributions that came from that. And perhaps as importantly, understanding the feedback loop that then goes from that process back into that understanding of what the agency and action for Science Granting Council is or could be. So I will hand over to my colleague Remy just at this point to speak about the findings of this piece of work.
Thank you, Cara, and thank you everyone for this opportunity. I think, Cara, you'll be able to keep moving the slides from your end, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just let me know.
Yeah. Thank you very much. As Carla just mentioned, STEX Plus drew on STEX project, and the area of study were the same as STEX project, meaning research management, use of STI indicators, partnerships and private sector engagement, networking with science granting councils, and then the learning, monitoring, learning, and evaluation. This the last one was a different project, but which was part of the core evaluation of how science granting councils has been doing for the last 5 years. So STEX Plus and STEC were focusing more on those four broad domain areas, but in line or in close collaboration with the existing monitoring, evaluation, and learning work. Next. In terms of the actual findings, I think I won't need to go into details of the findings, but maybe I'll just draw on some of the specific examples. For instance, just in line with the conceptual framework of 6+ project, we could see, it has already been found as part of 6 project, countries, and particularly the SJCs, have learned from the Science Gathering Council's initiative program, but in terms of response to COVID, where it was really a function or a matter of different context and nature of the councils in different countries. For instance, like regarding the research funding, while some councils were able to negotiate within their government to set up different, a specific fund for research. For instance, like in Burkina Faso, other councils like in Rwanda, the NCST of Rwanda were able to, redirect or create a new call within the existing fund, just being able to create a new call specifically for COVID within the existing budget. That was a capability which was built through the Science Gathering Council's initiative program. Next. Next, please. Again, regarding the inter-councils networking and partnerships, this again was brought to the fore through the response to the pandemic, when the collaboration among or networking among councils was really drawing on the existing collaboration through the initiative. For instance, we found out that the FNI in Mozambique was able to launch a joint call with the NCST of Zambia, of course with support from SIDA, but that collaboration was a result of existing, working together on research calls. And then concerning the influence to national responses, again, this was found to be a result of council's steadiness and position and role within the overall national science system. For instance, like out of the 4 out of 7 councils which responded to the study, confirming that they were directly involved in the national COVID response task force, while the remaining 3 said that they were indirectly involved in the coordination, national coordination response of the pandemic. We could find that those who were directly involved in the national COVID response task force, they were either, actually they are all combining, research and innovation, funding, coordination, but also STI policy oversight, as well as science advice. Whereas those who were not involved in directly involved in the national COVID response, coordination, were really mainly focusing on R&D and research and innovation funding, but not responsible for STI policy. Of course, we found that there was an exception of NCST of Rwanda, which is doing both research and innovation funding, and as well as coordination, as well as STI policy oversight, but it was not part of the national response task force. Next, please. Yeah, this just gives a snapshot of the summary of how the councils in 10 countries were able to respond into different aspects, including like, collaboration within the local actors, or collaboration with other councils, as I just mentioned, like with the example of Mozambique and Zambia, or collaboration with new or external or existing external funders, or as well as partnering with the private sector or the civil society. So we came up with this type of findings from our study. Next. Yeah. So in summary, as it was the argument, I mean, it was argued by Julius and Anne-Marie in their study about the COVID has revealed or has brought to the fore the existence or the need for institutional entrepreneurship among the science granting councils. We have found the same, and particularly with the example of the NRF Kenya. It's just a very small and narrow organization, but because of the needs and urgency, so the need and the agency and the emergency of them making a call for research and innovation in response to COVID, the council was not able to to find the human resource to run the call. So they opted to outsource another knowledge-based organization in Kenya with the capability of running the call, and then they work together to make that call. I think that was shown as an example of institutional entrepreneurship within the councils, which, as Carla mentioned, that maybe in the further phases of the Science Granting Councils Initiative program, will be able to know whether or not those capabilities will continue. I don't think I have much to say. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, just like we are acknowledging the founders for the study, as well as the participants into the study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Remy and Carla. That was a really nice presentation. I mean, I guess one thing that comes across from all the presentations is the importance of governments finding new ways to work in post-COVID, and the absolute rise to the challenge in some respects that at national level there's kind of renewed energy and vigor, I think, and Kahindi didn't speak about that explicitly, but that might be something to explore. And I saw Julius asking a question in the chat about that. If it's okay with everyone, could we agree to go for 15 minutes, so 5 to 5, just to talk about the presentations, or is that not going to work for people?
That's okay.
It's okay from my end as well.
Yeah,
Great.
okay for me.
I'm sorry, I will shortly drop the call because I have to rush home. The curfew today is at 6.
Ah, okay.
So I was working from work. Yeah.
Need to rush.
I will need 15 minutes to go.
Okay.
Home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was my pleasure listening to all this interesting work, and I hope to catch up later.
Thanks so much for being part of it, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Bye.
So maybe we could just start with that question that you put in the chat, Julius, to Kahindi.
Okay.
Yes,
Thanks. I was just trying to respond to that. So good, good you brought that up. Interestingly, we it's a backdated data set we explored. Like I said, it's not, the paper is not supported by any project whatsoever to demystify in a way the effect of COVID on performance. But you know, indirectly, you could as well assume, you know, from the point of the construct of a specific indicator regarding the quality of government support programs. Because if you look at it from the predictive margins, you will see clearly, you know, as compared to what you see from the regression outputs. Because, you know, even if the regression outputs are somewhat biased, you know, with regards to the coefficients, but by the time you determine, you know, further exploration using the predictive margins, you will have a complete different dynamic. And that is exactly what you've seen from the predictive margins I showed. And if you want me to share that again, I could, so that I give you a few insight into the margins, and to tell you, you know, presumably how this thing can actually be affected by this for Sub-Saharan Africa. So let me go to the predictive margins.
Because just let me, while you're doing that, Emmanuel, I don't think you were here for Kahindi's presentation, but the work that's being done by Kahindi and his team is around the effectiveness of government support for innovation. So actually very relevant to the kind of research that you're doing, I think.
Yes, of course. Yes, I was here halfway.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
So you can see from the predictive margin, you know, if you tend to look at the working capital from bank, the working capital from bank, when we assume that, okay, you know, it's zero, you see the relationship. When you assume that, okay, the working capital is 100, you know, 100%, you still see the relationship is actually negative. So, which means it tells you, you know, on the x-axis is actually the quality of government support. And this was standardized, and the standardization is to determine the strength of the quality of government support. So, and that is exactly what you see here, that in Sub-Saharan Africa, it's actually a different dynamic altogether, that government support in a way is not, you know, really impacting, you know, or moderating the relationship between firm level internal and external resources to support the innovative endeavor of firms. However, if we tend to look at it from the female perspective,
yes,
and that, which is this, you see it's a different thing entirely. We see that it is possible.
So do you think that's, sorry, Kahindi, do you think that's because of the kind of force of female entrepreneurial activity, just that the quality of that, or do you think it's something to do with the way that government programs are constructed that makes it more effective for female entrepreneurs than others? And I wondered whether the STEX project had explored that kind of dimension in terms of training offered by SJCI. But Kahindi, to you first.
I think I will agree on both sides. You know, both you've just raised, you know, is actually looking at, you know, what is the substance of these, you know, government programs. Even if we don't pay attention to the quality in a way, but if we tend to look at the substance of it, you know, female entrepreneurs could actually leverage this, and this support is actually connected to consulting, you know, indicators. It connects consulting indicators. So on a larger scale, you will see that, you know, firms will actually limit cost in hiring, you know, consulting firms to actually perform this for them. So if government is able to provide these, you know, it could help, you know, firms to do well. And this is basically what we see with the female entrepreneurs. However, if you try to dichotomizing it to get the effect on the male entrepreneur, we also have the same effect for male. And if I take you, you know, just to, you know, a region with, you know, a stronger, you know, quality support program for the, you see the relationship here. So the relationship is actually different from that of Sub-Saharan Africa. If you go to Latin America is quite identical to that of Sub-Saharan Africa, which is actually, they have different institutional configuration. However, if you look at the intersection of the yellow and the red line, you will see that firms will decide at the intersection to say, okay, we want to go further to explore this support that government is providing. So at this point, it becomes a saturation point for firms to now decide, okay, I think at this point it's okay for me to say, okay, is enough for me to explore this support from the government. And you can see that, how, different it is from the different regions. This is Latin America, and it's basically what it is. And this visualization tells more of the story than even the regression coefficient.
So that's really interesting. But coming back to Carla, Remy, and Julius, I think Anne-Marie's left us now. I mean, I don't know whether on the issue of gender, I think gender was part of what you were looking at with the effectiveness of SJCI training, wasn't it, team?
Yes, it was. Yeah, I can come in quickly, then Remy and Carla can add. I think it's interesting looking at the work that Kehinde and colleagues did, where you actually look at what's the impact of that when you change those dimensions or the dynamics around gender, what's actually the impact on the performance of the system. So in our case, we looked at the input and the output in terms of the push towards making sure that female scientists are more included in the systems, and then also even the numbers translating into that. So could see the increase in the numbers. But what we haven't done, or what wasn't part of the scope, was actually to see how the system was then performing as a result of the changes in the gender and inclusion dynamics. And I think that's an important question really to explore in further work, to say when there are all these changes in terms of who is included, how is that translating into a different kind of performance for the system? Yeah, I don't know, Carla and Remy, maybe you've got different thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have no, it's definitely not a different thought. No, I think that's absolutely true of what we looked at. I think it was really, yeah, similarly, I found your presentation fascinating, and seeing the kind of mapping of ultimate impact, I suppose, because I think this is one of the things that maybe we recognized a lot of institutions struggle with, in that reporting of gender outcomes becomes just quantitative. So it's just an increased number of women receiving grants, for example. But yeah, it's much more difficult to track what happens after that point and get a more kind of nuanced understanding of what the actual impact is going forward. So I think it gives a lot of good thought there. Yeah.
Remy, I can see you've put a question in the chat. Do you want to just speak?
Yeah, maybe, thank you very much, Joe. Maybe before moving to the question, I want to just add on what Carla just mentioned about, and Julius, about our findings in terms of gender and inclusivity into the science system. That was actually one of our recommendations moving forward with the SJCI phase 2, because with SJCI phase 1, the gender and inclusiveness was mainly on numbers. See, like just even with the call, they say out of the, I mean, part of the such team should be let's say 30% should be women, or the PI should be a woman. But in terms of for impact, we recommended that actually there should be qualitatively, specific themes targeting women issues. That's where the impact could be seen in a greater way. Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So moving back to my question to Kehinde, I could see that theoretically your argument is based on two perspectives. One is financial heterogeneity as well as ownership heterogeneity of innovative farms. But this just has struck me because I read because I'm currently reading for my own PhD, and I came across this paper from Frederici, who worked on the 2 case studies in Kigali. Rwanda's innovation science and technology innovation system is, claimed to be good, or maybe compared to some other countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly to the policy and program framework in support of innovative farms, particularly in the tech industry. So this paper seems controversial in the sense that the author just went from bottom up, and we went to speak with the owners, the CEOs and entrepreneurs of 2 key farms in Kigali. And then one of the findings from his study is that, irrespective of the quality or the standards or support of government programs and policies, the performance of farms can be hindered or jeopardized by the boundaries and cultural dynamics within the farm, whereby the different within the farm, having the way the CEO discusses with or interact with the entrepreneurs or staff or colleagues can have an impact on the overall performance of the farm, irrespective of all other good or supportive initiatives behind outside the farm. So I think my question was to Kahinde was whether your modeling has just taken care of these 2 factors, boundaries and cultural dynamics within the farm, or not.
Thanks, Remy, for this important question. I do agree with you, but in terms of boundaries, when you look at boundaries, it's actually a very ambiguous term, and at the same time, it could extend beyond
Sure.
Beyond the firm, as it were. And the boundary, if I may address your boundary specifically, is actually looking at the 4 walls of a firm. Firms could be highly secretive in revealing some of their maybe possibly their knowledge to other this thing. So in order for them to protect that, they tend not to engage with any government agency or whatsoever. However, a firm has a structure. A firm, works with structure, and as a result, that would definitely affect, its effectiveness and its performance. However, it also depends on if a firm is willing to take part or to use any of these instruments are provided by the government in order to support firms. And if you look into what the specific this thing I actually use, is actually targeting SMEs and particularly startups. So it all depends on a firm, if at all we want to explore this channel of providing support for SMEs to advance. But the external and the internal environment is actually fundamental to the success of firm, and the interactiveness of these constructs are really important for a firm to succeed. So irrespective of whether you look at it from the perspective of cultural dynamics, and remember Kigali, for example, has a very distinct also cultural configuration that could also impact the existence of firms in that particular country as compared to what you have in Nigeria, in Ghana, and other sub-Saharan African countries. So this cultural diversity and also the inhibition of firms trying to protect their knowledge, could be another factor that will drive, their performance, and also condition, the fact that they want to use government support initiative in whatever way or not.
Just so interesting, and I'm sure there's so many other kind of connections we could make between what you're saying, Kehinde, and the work that was done on the STEX and STEX Plus projects in terms of public-private partnerships. Also, the really interesting point that Emmanuel made, that IP protection is one thing, and getting rid of TRIPS is very popular as a policy solution in certain circles, but it's unlikely in and of itself to solve the problem. And again, coming back to what goes on within the firm is a much more complicated and diverse issue. We are coming up to 5. Just great session. Thank you, everyone. That was just, and I really do hope that the conversation will continue. I'm sure, yes, I don't know how this group came together. These 4 presentations came together. I mean, the STEX and STEX Plus were the links there are obvious between Carla and Julius and Anne-Marie and Remy. But Emmanuel and Kehinde, it's been a real pleasure to hear your presentations, and I hope that the multiple kind of links and connections which I think exist between these areas of research that there'll be further conversation and comparison, interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been a pleasure, and it's a pity we ran out of time to discuss the different presentations in detail, but the connections are really there. We are talking about ways of decision making, ways of funding or organizing these different sectors, which are having to change as a result of the pandemic. But what the pandemic has done is to just confirm what has been there underneath already, that most of the systems or the architectures that are there need to change, whether it's for the pharmaceutical industry or for government support for SMEs or for science granting councils or science systems. There's always that imperative to change and to adjust. And I think what our 4 papers have done is to really just bring that reality together from different perspectives. So we should definitely be able to continue this conversation and see how we can organize our thoughts together and maybe do a joint publication or even a special issue with a few additional papers. We can do a special issue that really teases out these issues and the different concepts that connect our papers.
Absolutely.
That would be great to see.
Yeah, that would be great. So maybe we could have final thoughts from everyone as we wind up. Joe, maybe you can have the final say as the chair, but maybe Carla, your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it actually just ties very strongly from what Joe has said and what you've just said. Like, it was actually wonderful to hear 4 papers that in a way are completely different, but actually were all very strongly connected in a number of the issues that we were talking about. So I think it's, I don't know, it's like a wonderful chance in a way that we came together into the same session. But no, I think it was great to see those connections in terms of trying to understand how, essentially just how different actors get through, get into and get through these systems of innovation and I think it's just wonderful to see like the different lenses that we've taken and the different levels that we've gone to in doing that. So I think they were just so interestingly complementary, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, so you can call upon the next person we are passing on to.
Who am I passing on to? Who's next on my list? I'll do it that way. It's actually you, so I'll do the I'll do the next person. Is Remy.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was actually a great opportunity for me to participate in such academic and policy and practice type of conference, and I've really learned a lot from not only from my colleagues at STIP, but also from Kehinde and Emmanuel. What struck me the most was the issue of this IP around pharmaceutical industry and how COVID pandemic is changing the landscape around the governance of it. When Emmanuel was presenting, I was saying, I think Julius is so interested in this more than I do because of his academic background. But on top of that, this actually shed the light on my understanding of this domain, because initially I thought that maybe making an IP available free of charge would actually be something obviously positive and good to everyone. But now I understand that it has some associated drawbacks which need to be looked at carefully. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Remy, maybe you can pass on to Emmanuel.
I can pass on to Emmanuel. Thank you for the advice. Thank you.
Yeah, Remy, thanks so much for the comments. I actually appreciate being here, and then I gained much for the time I joined. And then Kehinde is my Nigerian brother. I appreciate the contributions. And then from the resilience of organizations, and then those involved in the science funding and so on. So I'm happy to be here, and I gained quite a lot as well. I say thanks to the chair, Professor Joe. I met her in Finland 2013. And then the rest of those who were in this panel. So thanks so much. I learned much. So I think maybe that should be Kehinde's turn. Thank you.
Once again, thanks, Emmanuel. And I do appreciate, the knowledge, connectivity and the interplay of the different presentations. You will see, if you try to put them, together, you will see there is that, synergy in all the papers. And when you tend to put them together, they all come to a significant, level of, performance, how that could advance the performance of firms, and looking at it from the perspective of governance, looking at it from the perspective of firms, internal and external resources, and looking at it from the perspective of other cultural norms and all that. So it's a good community, small, but interplay of a dynamic and integrated knowledge, and it's a great appreciation to be here and to present my work. Yeah.
So I think that's is there anyone who hasn't gone? I think it's Julius. Do you want to say any final thoughts and final words?
Yeah, I think that's everyone now. So we've got your email addresses, right, Kehinde and Emmanuel? We do?
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, so we'll keep the conversations going, and we see how we proceed from here.
Brilliant.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you, Joe, for the excellent facilitation.
Pleasure. And I really didn't do much. I didn't have to do much. They were just really interesting presentations. And I think Kehinde nailed it. Small but perfectly formed. That was this panel. It was great.
Exactly.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks.
No, it's great. And thanks to our organizers. I know we've got tech support in the room. Thank you for hosting us, and appreciation to UEA for hosting the conference this time.
Indeed.
Yeah. Thank you all very much, and keep safe.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
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 Bye, Emmanuel.
Bye.